They mocked her in front of everyone, but the CEO's proposal silenced the room. Part 2. The Revelation. 3 weeks had passed since that first dinner, and Nora found herself living in a world she barely recognized. Daniel had kept his promise to call, and their relationship had developed with the steady warmth of sunrise. They met for coffee, took long walks through the city's parks, and discovered they shared a love of obscure documentaries and hole-in-the-wall restaurants that served the kind of authentic food that reminded them both of childhood. What surprised Nora most was how easy it all felt. Daniel never made her feel like she needed to be anyone other than herself. He listened when she talked about her work with genuine interest, asked thoughtful questions about her design process, and even offered to be a test audience when she was developing presentations for clients. In return, she learned more about the man behind the quiet confidence. Daniel, she discovered, had a dry sense of humor and an unexpected vulnerability when it came to discussing his previous marriage. He had loved his ex-wife, but they had grown apart as his career demanded more of his time, and she found fulfillment in a life that didn't include the constant travel and pressure that came with his work. "I learned too late that success means nothing if you don't have someone to share it with," he had told her during one of their evening walks. "But I also learned that the wrong person can make success feel like failure." He was deliberately vague about the specifics of his career, describing it only as business consulting and helping companies restructure their operations. Nora didn't press for details. She had dated enough men who defined themselves entirely by their job titles and bank accounts. Daniel's reluctance to discuss his professional life felt refreshing, like he wanted to be known for who he was rather than what he did. At work, Victoria's attitude toward Nora had shifted from dismissive condescension to something more pointed and hostile. The success of the blind date had clearly not gone according to plan, and Victoria was not someone who accepted failure gracefully. "Still seeing your mystery man?" Victoria asked one morning, appearing at Nora's desk with her usual predatory smile. "It's been, 3 weeks now? That's practically a record for you, isn't it?" Nora kept her eyes on her computer screen, refusing to be baited. "We're seeing each other, yes." "How lovely. And what did you say he does for work again?" "Business consulting." Victoria's laugh was sharp and knowing. "How wonderfully vague. You know, sweetie, men who are secretive about their jobs usually have good reasons. Maybe he's not quite as successful as he pretends to be. Or maybe he's married and just didn't mention it." The suggestion hit exactly where Victoria intended it to, feeding into Nora's deepest insecurities about relationships and trust. Her last boyfriend had lied about his intentions, his feelings, even his commitment to their future together. The thought that Daniel might be deceiving her in some fundamental way made her stomach clench with familiar anxiety. Emma, who had been listening from her nearby desk, finally intervened. "Victoria, don't you have actual work to do? Some of us are trying to meet deadlines." Victoria's green eyes flashed with annoyance, but she maintained her smile. "Of course, darling. I'm just looking out for our little Nora. Someone has to." After Victoria left, Emma came over to Nora's desk and leaned against it, her expression concerned. "Please tell me you're not letting her get in your head." "I'm trying." "Not to," Nora said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Nora, look at me." Emma waited until she had her friend's attention. "Victoria is furious that her little scheme backfired. She wanted to humiliate you, and instead you ended up meeting someone who clearly cares about you. She's going to do everything she can to sabotage this because your happiness makes her look bad." Emma was right, Nora knew, but the seeds of doubt had been planted. That evening, when Daniel suggested they try a new restaurant across town, she found herself studying his face for signs of deception, analyzing his words for hidden meanings. The easy comfort she had felt with him began to feel fragile, like something that could shatter if she looked at it too closely. Daniel noticed the change immediately. "You're quiet tonight," he observed as they waited for their appetizers. "More than usual, I mean. Is everything okay?" "Just tired," she said, which was partly true. The constant vigilance required to navigate Victoria's escalating hostility was exhausting. "Nora." His voice was gentle but serious. "Talk to me. Something's bothering you." The direct approach was so typically Daniel that it almost made her smile. He didn't play games or fish for information. When he wanted to know something, he asked. It's nothing really, just work stuff. Work stuff involving Victoria, I'm guessing? She looked up at him in surprise. How did you... She's been texting me, he said simply. Nothing inappropriate, just little messages checking in on how things are going between us. Asking if I'm happy with her matchmaking skills. The information hit Nora like cold water. Victoria was in contact with Daniel behind her back, maintaining some kind of connection that Nora didn't understand. All her worst? Fears about being manipulated, about being part of some game she couldn't see, came rushing back. What kind of messages? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Daniel reached for his phone. Here, you can read them yourself. He handed her the device, and she scrolled through the conversation thread. The messages were exactly as he had described, seemingly innocent check-ins that nevertheless felt intrusive and presumptuous. Victoria wrote as if she had some kind of ongoing investment in their relationship, as if she deserved regular updates on their progress. I don't respond to most of them, Daniel said, watching her read. But I wanted you to know she was reaching out. I don't like secrets, especially not ones that involve people I care about. The phrase people I care about should have made her heart flutter, but instead it made her feel guilty for doubting him. Here he was, being completely transparent about Victoria's behavior, and she had been sitting here wondering if he was hiding something from her. I'm sorry, she said, handing him back his phone. Victoria got in my head today with some suggestions, that maybe you weren't being entirely honest about your work, and What about my work? The question was sharp, sharper than anything she had heard from him before. She looked up to find his expression had changed, becoming guarded and tense. The easy warmth that usually characterized their interactions had vanished, replaced by something cooler and more distant. She just said that men who are vague about their jobs usually have reasons, and you believed her? The hurt in his voice made her chest ache. No, not exactly, but I realized I don't actually know very much about what you do for work, and because I was trying to avoid exactly this, he said, his voice quiet but intense. I was trying to get to know you and have you know me, without all the complications that come with my professional life. What complications? Daniel was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his hands. When he looked up at her again, his expression was resigned. My name is Daniel Pierce, he said. I'm the founder and CEO of Pierce Industries. We're a venture capital firm that focuses on sustainable technology and ethical business practices. Last year, our portfolio companies generated over $2 billion in revenue. The words hung in the air between them like a wall, suddenly, constructed from nothing. Nora stared at him, processing the information. Pierce Industries was a name she recognized from business magazines and news articles. It was the kind of company that made headlines when it invested in new startups or when its CEO spoke at major conferences. She started, then stopped. Not sure how to finish the sentence. Rich, yes. Powerful in some circles. And exactly the kind of person who attracts women who are more interested in my bank account than in me. His voice was bitter in a way she had never heard before, which is why I don't usually lead with that information when I'm getting to know someone. Nora felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Everything about their relationship suddenly looked different through this new lens. The expensive restaurants where he always insisted on paying, his vagueness about his schedule, his designer clothes that she had assumed were just good taste rather than serious money. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. Because of this, he said, gesturing between them. Because now you're looking at me differently. Now you're wondering what I want from you. Whether this is real, whether you can trust your own feelings because they might be influenced by the money. He was right. Even as she tried to process the revelation, she could feel her perception of him shifting, complicating. The easy equality she had felt between them was gone, replaced by questions about power, dynamics and motivations that she didn't know how to answer. I need some air, she said, standing up abruptly. Daniel didn't try to stop her as she walked toward the restaurant's exit, but she could feel his eyes following her. Outside, the cool night air helped clear her head slightly, but the fundamental problem remained. The man she had been falling for was not the man she thought he was. She was still standing on the sidewalk, trying to sort through her emotions, when her phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "How's dinner going? He's quite a catch, isn't he? Much more successful than he lets on." The message was like a slap. Victoria had known. She had known who Daniel was from the beginning, had known about his wealth and status, and had set up the blind date anyway. But why? What possible benefit could Victoria gain from introducing Nora to someone so far out of her league? Unless that was the point. Unless the plan had been for Nora to embarrass herself by falling for someone who would eventually realize she wasn't good enough for him. Daniel appeared beside her, moving, with the quiet confidence she had come to associate with him. "Can we talk about this?" "Did Victoria know?" she asked without looking at him. "When she set us up, did she know who you are?" His silence was answer enough. "So this was all part of some plan," she continued, the pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. "She introduced me to someone way out of my league, probably expecting me to make a fool of myself. And when that didn't work, she's been texting you, staying involved, waiting for it to fall apart naturally when you came to your senses." "Nora, no, that's not, isn't it?" She turned to face him finally. "Be honest, Daniel. When you met me that first night, did you think we were well matched? Did you look at me and think, here's someone who fits naturally into my world?" The question hung between them, brutal in its honesty. Daniel's hesitation told her everything she needed to know. "I thought you were beautiful," he said finally, "and kind, and genuine in a way that I hadn't experienced in years. The rest of it, the social stuff, the money stuff, I thought we could figure it out as we went along, because you assumed I'd be so grateful for the attention that I wouldn't question it. Because I hoped you'd give us a chance to see if the connection was real." The pain in his voice almost broke her resolve, but she had been down this road before. She had believed in a future that someone else was already planning to abandon. She had trusted her feelings only to discover they were based on incomplete information. "I can't do this," she said, stepping back from him. "I can't be someone's experiment in dating down. I can't spend every day wondering if this is the day." "You realize you can do better. That's not what this is, isn't it? You kept a pretty fundamental part of your identity secret from me for 3 weeks. How am I supposed to trust my feelings when they're based on a version of you that doesn't really exist?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair, the gesture she had come to find endearing, now seeming like evidence of his frustration with having to explain himself to someone like her. "The money doesn't change who I am," he said. "It doesn't change how I feel about you. But it changes everything else. It changes what other people think of us together. It changes what I think about my own motivations. It changes the entire dynamic between us." She could see him struggling with the truth of what she was saying, could see him recognizing the impossible position his secrecy had created. "So that's it?" he asked. "Victoria gets what she wanted after all?" The question stung because it was accurate. Victoria had set this up expecting it to fail, and here Nora was, making sure it did exactly that. "Maybe Victoria was right about one thing," Nora said, calling another rideshare. "Maybe some matches just don't make sense, no matter how much you want them to." She left him standing on the sidewalk, and this time he didn't watch her go. As her car pulled away from the curb, Nora caught a glimpse of him in the side mirror, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders set in a line of defeat that made her heart ache even as she told herself she was doing the right thing. The next few days at work were torture. Victoria's satisfaction was palpable, though she was careful not to gloat too obviously. Instead, she offered sympathy that felt like salt in an open wound. "I heard things didn't work out with your mystery man," Victoria said, appearing at Nora's desk with coffee and a concerned expression. "I'm so sorry, sweetie, but honestly it's probably for the best. These whirlwind romances rarely last once the novelty wears off." Nora accepted the coffee, without looking up from her work. "Thanks for the insight. I just hate to see you get hurt. You're so trusting, so willing to believe the best in people. It's admirable, really, but it does make you vulnerable to men who might take advantage of that sweet nature." The patronizing tone was unbearable, but Nora forced herself to remain professional. She had a job to do, and she couldn't afford to let Victoria provoke her into a confrontation that would only make things worse. Emma, however, had no such restraints. "Victoria," she said, appearing beside Nora's desk with her arms crossed and her expression dangerous. "I couldn't help but overhear your concern for Nora's well-being. It's so touching, really, especially coming from someone who set her up with a stranger you knew nothing about." Victoria's smile faltered slightly. "I was trying to help. Were you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you orchestrated the whole thing to blow up exactly the way it did." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Victoria's green eyes flashed with something dangerous, but before she could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her expression shifted from annoyance to something like panic. "Excuse me," she said quickly, stepping away from Nora's desk to take the call. Nora couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see Victoria's body language change as she spoke. The confident posture deflated, her free hand gesturing frantically, as she talked in urgent, hushed tones. When Victoria returned 5 minutes later, her face was pale and her usual composure had cracked. "Everything okay?" Emma asked with false sweetness. "Fine," Victoria snapped, but her voice was strained. "Nora, I need to speak with you privately." Something in her tone made Nora's stomach drop. This wasn't Victoria's usual condescending approach. This was something else entirely. They walked to the small conference room in silence. Once the door was closed, Victoria turned to face her, and for the first time since Nora had known her, Victoria looked genuinely rattled. "I made a mistake," Victoria said without preamble. Nora blinked. "I'm sorry?" "With Daniel Pierce. I thought I knew what I was doing, but I was wrong." Victoria's hands were shaking slightly as she spoke. "Do you have any idea who he is?" "Yes, actually. He told me." Victoria's eyes widened. "He told you? About Pierce Industries? About the foundation?" "Foundation?" "The Pierce Foundation for Women's Empowerment. It's one of the largest charitable organizations supporting women in business and education. They've donated millions to causes that promote gender equality in the workplace." Nora felt a chill run down her spine. "What does that have to do with anything?" Victoria sat down heavily in one of the conference room chairs. "That was their legal department on the phone. Apparently Mr. Pierce has been conducting what they called a workplace harassment investigation regarding my behavior toward you." The words hit Nora like a physical blow. "What?" Screenshots of text messages, witness statements, documented incidents of workplace bullying. Victoria's voice was hollow. "They have everything, Nora. Every snide comment, every setup, every time I've undermined you or made you feel small. And they're prepared to take legal action." Nora sat down across from Victoria, trying to process what she was hearing. "But how would they have?" "He's been watching, apparently, or having people watch. That first night at the restaurant, when I interrupted your dinner, they had someone there documenting my behavior. The texts I sent him afterward, all evidence of ongoing harassment." The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Nora's mind was racing, trying to understand the implications of what Victoria was telling her. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked finally. Victoria looked up at her, and for the first time, Nora saw something like genuine remorse in her eyes. "Because I'm being fired, and because part of their settlement offer involves a formal apology to you and a donation to anti-bullying organizations in your name." "I don't understand. If Daniel was building a case against you, why didn't he tell me? Maybe because he knew you'd try to stop him. Or maybe because he wanted to protect you from being involved in the legal proceedings." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "Or maybe because he actually cares about you and didn't want to make this about revenge." The last possibility hung between them like an accusation. Nora had been so focused on protecting herself from being hurt that she had never considered Daniel might be protecting her in return. "There's more," Victoria continued. "The foundation wants to offer you a position, senior graphic designer for their communications department. It's a significant pay increase and an opportunity to work on campaigns that actually matter." Nora stared at her. "You're saying Daniel arranged for me to get a job offer?" "I'm saying Daniel Pierce is a man who sees injustice and takes action to correct it. And you apparently caught his attention not just personally but professionally." The conference room door opened and Emma poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but Nora, there's someone here to see you." Nora's heart began to race. "Who?" "Daniel. Pierce. He's waiting in the lobby." Victoria stood up slowly. "Go," she said quietly. "And Nora? For what it's worth, I think I understand now why he chose you. You have something I'll never have." "What's that?" "Integrity." Nora walked to the elevator on unsteady legs, her mind spinning with everything Victoria had revealed. The lobby seemed impossibly far away, and with each floor that passed, she felt less prepared for whatever conversation was waiting for her. Daniel was standing by the large windows that faced the street, his hands in his pockets, his posture tense. He was wearing a dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, and when he turned to face her, she saw exhaustion in his eyes. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi." They stood there for a moment, the space between them charged with everything that had gone unsaid during their last conversation. "Victoria told me about the investigation," Nora said finally. Daniel nodded. "I figured she would once the lawyers called. Why didn't you tell me?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "Because I wanted you to make your own decision about us, without feeling obligated by what I was doing about her." "And the job offer?" "That's separate. Your portfolio speaks for itself, Nora. The foundation has been looking for someone with your skills for months. The timing might be coincidental, but the offer is based entirely on merit." She wanted to believe him, but the timing was too convenient. The circumstances, too neat. "Daniel, I can't accept a job from you. It would be—" "It's not from me," he interrupted. "It's from the Foundation's hiring committee. I recused myself from the process entirely once they expressed interest in interviewing you. But you knew about it." "Yes, I knew about it. Just like I knew that Victoria was creating a hostile work environment for you and that someone needed to document it properly." His voice grew harder. "What I didn't know was that you'd assume the worst about my motives instead of giving me a chance to explain." The accusation stung because it was true. She had been so afraid of being manipulated that she had never considered he might be trying to help her. "I was scared," she said quietly. "Of me, of this, of feeling something real for someone who might not be real himself." Daniel stepped closer, his expression softening. "Nora, I am real. The money doesn't change that. The business doesn't change. That what I feel for you doesn't change because of any of it. But it changes everything else. The power dynamic, the way people will see us. Let them look," he said firmly. "I don't care what anyone else thinks about us. I care about what you think. I care about whether you're happy." The simple honesty of it broke through her defenses like sunlight through clouds. She had been so focused on all the ways their relationship could go wrong that she had forgotten all the ways it had already gone right. "The night we met," she said, "were you testing me somehow? Seeing how I'd react to the setup?" "No, I was just hoping you'd stay long enough for me to apologize for whatever Victoria had planned." He smiled slightly. "When you sat down anyway. When you didn't let their whispers drive you away, I knew you were stronger than you probably give yourself credit for. And when you found out about Victoria's behavior, I got angry. Angrier than I've been in years. Nobody should have to endure what you've been dealing with, especially not from someone who pretends to be looking out for your best interests." The explanation was so typically Daniel. Direct, protective, focused on justice rather than revenge. She could see now that everything he had done had been about stopping Victoria's harassment, not about proving a point or playing games. "I'm sorry," she said, "for not trusting you, for assuming you had ulterior motives. You don't have to apologize for protecting yourself. Your instincts aren't wrong, Nora. There are people who would try to manipulate you. I'm just not one of them." They stood in the lobby, people walking around them, the normal business of the day continuing while her world shifted on its axis. "So, what now?" she asked. "Now you decide what you want. The job offer is real, but it doesn't come with strings attached to me. You can take it or leave it based on whether it's right for your career. Same with us. We can try again, or we can walk away, but either way, it's your choice." The freedom in that statement was overwhelming. No pressure, no manipulation, just an invitation to choose her own path. "I want to try again," she said, but slowly. "I need to figure out how to be myself in your world without losing who I am." Daniel's smile was like sunrise. "We have all the time in the world." 6 months later, the Pierce Foundation's annual gala was held at the city's most prestigious hotel, a glittering affair that brought together philanthropists, activists, and business leaders from across the region. Nora stood at the edge of the ballroom, watching couples dance while she nursed a glass of champagne and tried not to feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of the event. She had accepted the job offer 4 months ago, after careful consideration and consultation with an employment lawyer who confirmed that her qualifications were more than sufficient for the position. The work was challenging and fulfilling in ways her previous job had never been. She was creating materials for campaigns that promoted education for girls in developing countries, supported women entrepreneurs, and fought against workplace harassment. Her relationship with Daniel had developed slowly, built on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. They had agreed to keep their personal and professional lives separate as much as possible, which meant that at work, she was simply Nora Volkov, senior graphic designer. Tonight, however, she was Daniel's girlfriend, attending her first major social event in his world. "You look beautiful," Daniel said, appearing beside her with his own glass of champagne. He was wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo that made him look like he belonged in this rarefied atmosphere, while she felt like she was playing dress-up in her elegant emerald green gown. "I feel like I'm going to say something wrong and embarrass you," she admitted. "Impossible," he said, taking her hand. "You're the most genuine person in this room. Trust me, that's refreshing." As if summoned by his words, a woman approached them with the predatory smile Nora had learned to recognize among Daniel's social circle. She was blonde, perfectly polished, and looked like she had stepped out of a society magazine. "Daniel, darling," the woman said, air-kissing his cheek. "How wonderful to see you, and this must be your friend." The pause before friend was deliberate, designed to make Nora feel awkward and out of place. "Catherine, I'd like you to meet Nora Volkov, my girlfriend," Daniel said smoothly. "Nora, this is Catherine Ashworth, her family foundation partners, with ours on several initiatives." Catherine's smile became more strained as she processed the introduction. "How lovely. And what do you do, Nora?" "I'm a graphic designer for the Pierce Foundation," Nora replied. "Oh, how practical." Catherine's tone suggested that practical was not particularly desirable. "I don't think I've seen you at these events before." "This is my first gala," Nora said honestly. "Well, you'll learn the ropes eventually. These things can be quite overwhelming for people who aren't used to them." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly, but before he could respond, Nora surprised herself by speaking up. "Actually, I find it fascinating," she said calmly. "It's interesting to see how passion for social causes translates into action when people have the resources to make a real difference. The Foundation's work has opened my eyes to how much good can be accomplished when people commit to using their privilege responsibly." Catherine blinked, clearly not expecting such a thoughtful response. "Yes, well, quite. If you'll excuse us," Daniel said, placing a protective hand on Nora's back. "I want to introduce Nora to some of our international partners." As they walked away, Daniel leaned down to whisper in her ear. "That was perfectly handled. She was trying to make me feel small, and instead you made her feel shallow. Much better strategy." They spent the evening moving through the crowd, and Nora found herself relaxing as she realized that most people were genuinely interested in the Foundation's work and her role in it. Her background in design and her fresh perspective on their campaigns made her a valuable conversation partner, not just Daniel's girlfriend. The evening's highlight was the presentation of the Foundation's annual impact report, featuring designs and materials that Nora had created. Seeing her work projected on the large screens, knowing that it was helping to tell stories of women who had been empowered by the Foundation's programs, filled her with a sense of purpose she had never experienced in her previous job. During the drive home, Daniel was unusually quiet. Penny for your thoughts? Nora asked. I was thinking about something Catherine said. He replied. About you learning the ropes of these events. Nora's stomach clenched. Are you having second thoughts about bringing me? God, no. I was thinking about how wrong she was. You don't need to learn anything, Nora. You're already exactly who you should be. The people worth knowing will see that immediately, and the people who don't aren't worth your time. He pulled into her apartment complex and walked her to her door, as had become their routine. Tonight was perfect, he said, taking her hands in his. You were perfect. Even when I got nervous talking to the ambassador's wife, especially then. Your passion for the literacy program came through so clearly that she ended up pledging an additional $50,000 to the cause. Nora laughed. I had no idea I was being so persuasive. That's what makes you so effective. You're not trying to impress anyone or play political games. You just care about the work, and people respond to that authenticity. He kissed her goodnight, soft and sweet, and she watched him drive away before going inside. In her bathroom mirror, she barely recognized herself in the elegant gown and carefully styled hair. But the woman looking back at her seemed confident, poised, happy in a way that had nothing to do with the fancy clothes or expensive setting. She was still Nora Volkoff, the quiet graphic designer who preferred small gatherings to large parties. But she was also someone who could hold her own in any room, someone whose work mattered, someone who was loved for exactly who she was. 1 year later, the small art gallery was packed with people admiring the photography exhibition that showcased the Pierce Foundation's work around the world. Nora moved through the crowd, checking on the displays and making sure everything was running smoothly. This had been her project from conception to execution, and seeing it come together so beautifully filled her with quiet pride. Nora, Emma called out, appearing beside her with a huge grin. This is incredible. I can't believe you put all this together. It was a team effort, Nora replied, but she was smiling. Emma had driven down from the old office specifically for the opening, and having her there made the evening feel complete. Don't be modest. Daniel's been telling everyone who will listen that this was your vision entirely. Nora glanced across the room to where Daniel was speaking with a group of potential donors, gesturing toward one of the photographs that showed a young girl in Guatemala reading a book provided by the Foundation's literacy program. He caught her eye and smiled, that warm, genuine expression that still made her heart skip. Things are good with you too? Emma asked, following her gaze. Really good, Nora said. Better than I ever thought possible, actually. I'm so glad. After everything with Victoria had indeed been fired as promised. The last Nora had heard, she was working for a smaller firm in another city, hopefully having learned something from the experience. Nora didn't wish her ill, but she was grateful not to deal with her toxic behavior anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel's voice carried across the gallery as he called for attention. Before we conclude this evening, I'd like to say a few words about the person who made tonight possible. Nora felt heat rise in her cheeks as the crowd turned toward Daniel. When I founded the Pierce Foundation, I believed in the power of resources to create positive change. But it wasn't until we hired Nora Volkoff that I truly understood the power of passion and vision to amplify that impact. Her work tells stories that numbers alone cannot capture. Her creativity brings our mission to life in ways that inspire action and generosity. The crowd applauded, and Nora felt tears prick her eyes at the genuine warmth in his voice. But tonight isn't just about celebrating Nora's professional achievements, Daniel continued, and something in his tone made her look at him more sharply. It's also about celebrating the person who has changed my life in ways I never expected. He was walking toward her now, the crowd parting to let him through. Nora's heart began to race as she realized what was happening. Nora, he said, stopping in front of her and taking her hands. A year and a half ago, you walked into a restaurant for what you thought was going to be the worst blind date of your life. Instead, you gave me the best night I'd had in years. The gallery had gone completely silent, everyone watching as Daniel dropped to one knee. You've taught me that the most beautiful things in life are often the quietest ones. That strength doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. That love grows not from grand gestures, but from daily choices to see and value each other exactly as we are. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Nora Volkov, will you marry?"
Me?
The ring was perfect. A simple solitaire that caught the gallery's soft lighting and sparkled like captured starlight. It wasn't the largest diamond in the room, but it was exactly what she would have chosen for herself. Through her tears, she could see the faces of the people around them. Emma was crying and grinning simultaneously. The foundation's board members looked delighted. Even the photographer from the local newspaper was capturing the moment, but all of that faded into background noise as she looked into Daniel's eyes and saw the man who had seen her worth from the very beginning, who had protected her without her knowledge, who had loved her quietly and steadily until she was ready to love him back. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying clearly in the silent room. "Yes, of course." The applause that followed was thunderous. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, and in that moment, surrounded by the work they had created together and the people who supported them, Nora knew she was exactly where she belonged. Epilogue. 2 years later. The wedding had been small and perfect, held in the foundation's offices with flowers from the community, garden they had funded, and photographs by the same artist whose work had launched their engagement. Victoria had not been invited, though Nora had heard through mutual acquaintances that she had seen the announcement in the business journal and had actually sent a congratulatory note, brief but seemingly sincere. Now, as Nora Pierce sat in her new office, she had taken Daniel's name but kept her professional independence. She reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. The woman who had once hidden in the background of office meetings was now regularly speaking at conferences about the intersection of design and social impact. The foundation had grown significantly under her creative direction, and she had been featured in several magazines as a rising leader in the nonprofit sector. But the best part of her new life was also the quietest part. Coming home each evening to Daniel, sharing stories about their respective days, planning foundation programs over breakfast, and discovering that love, when built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values, only grew stronger with time. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Saw the article about your latest campaign in the Times. So proud of you. Coffee next week?" Nora smiled as she typed back her agreement. Some friendships, she had learned, were worth fighting for and maintaining across any distance or change in circumstances. As she prepared to leave the office for the day, she caught sight of her reflection in the window. The woman looking back at her was confident, accomplished, and genuinely happy. She wore success gracefully, without arrogance, and she had never lost the quiet strength that had first caught Daniel's attention. The elevator doors opened to reveal Daniel waiting for her, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked from their garden at home. "How was your day, Mrs. Pierce?" he asked, offering her the flowers. "Perfect," she said, taking his hand. Absolutely perfect. And for the first time in her life, she meant it completely. If this story touched your heart even just a little, if you believe that kindness can heal and that love can grow from the most unexpected places, then don't forget to hit that hype button and subscribe to Every Verse Stories for more powerful tales that remind us what truly matters. We share real emotional and inspiring stories that speak to the soul. Your support helps us keep telling the stories that move the world. Subscribe, hit, and stay with us for stories that heal. This is Every Verse Stories. See you in the next one.